Well, I can call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of August on the 26th at 12:06 p.m. on a Thursday. Just 1 second. I can't see any of you, so I'm sorry about that. Just 1 minute.
Does anyone have Nejla's contact information?
Not besides email.
Same.
I do, I believe.
I don't know if you want to see if she's going to make it today.
I
could probably help with the meeting if I need.
I'd have to search through messages to look for her telephone number.
I'm looking at the agenda, ladies, and the first is the introduction and the roll call.
Right,
So,
and so today here we have Nicole Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Mann. We have Katz here, and we have Becky Vistani from the council, and myself, Commissioner Bradford. Alex, Commissioner Mann, can you still take notes for this meeting?
Yeah, I've already started.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. We have an update on the legal definition of a quorum. Would you like me to read that for you all? It says, this is from Stephen Lucas with the council. It says, we have had several conversations with the legal department and one with the state public access counselor. And here's where it's left us. I think our code has some ambiguity that probably needs to be clarified one way or another. As written, I believe our code requires at least a majority of the members appointed and serving on the commission to be present to have a quorum. This differs from what I last communicated to the commission and is informed by input from the PAC, who I believe would consider a gathering of a majority of the serving commissioners to constitute a meeting for purposes of the open door policy law. Sorry, of the open door law. As I understand it, this also differs from past guidance given by the legal department to the city's other boards, commissions. At the moment, I believe there are 8 members appointed to the commission, meaning at least 5 need to be present to have a quorum. Please note our local code also states that majority vote means a majority of the members of a board, commission, or council who are present and voting. From this, it follows that a vote of 3 to 2 would be sufficient for the commission to act. A word of caution, though, even if it's possible to act with only 5 members present, with only 3 in support, it might be advisable, depending on the item up for vote, to wait until more members are present and can weigh in. Quorum requirements are in place to protect against a totally underrepresentative action in the name of the commission by an unduly small number of people. This might not be a pressing concern for most of the actions the commission might take, but should be kept in mind. I hope this addresses your questions, concerns. Let me know if I can assist further. Stephen.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I had technical issues and had to download Zoom again.
I definitely understand. I did too.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown Sparks, I now have the agenda up if you need help further.
Just 1 second, Commissioner Miller. When we get to item V, would you take over, please? Number 5.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes?
No, so I'll abstain from approving them because I haven't read them yet.
Okay. Would you like me to go over them?
Is it in packet 1 or 2? I can look at them real quick.
It's in the back.
It's in, one of them is the notice. It's
Okay,
just called the packet. The other one is the actual packet.
Okay. Let's see. Aha, yep. I picked the wrong one.
Um,
Thank you, Commissioner Mann, for doing minutes.
He's been doing a wonderful job.
Okay,
And we have quorum today. Commissioner Outsong, is there any way that we can see you? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I had to step away for a minute.
No problem. I just wanted to do a visual up or down if we could approve the minutes or not that way.
I would
Okay.
like to vote yes.
Would someone make a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, I'll make a motion to approve them.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right. Let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we have all in favor and 0 opposed. Commissioner Miller, I'm handing it over to you.
Number 5 on the agenda is establishment of a regular meeting schedule. Arvind, Commissioner Haddish had sent an email saying he prefers, I don't have that email in front of me. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 4 to 5 or early evening hours for
Yeah.
meetings. Was that right?
Yes, just a minute.
I believe he said he would prefer to meet at 4:45 or 5 o'clock and no earlier than that on any day of the week.
Thank you. So I think we can probably get feedback from everybody on what their preferences are before we do anything else. We can't vote on it if we don't know how everybody feels about it. So there is I think Becky had made a really good chart for us. If everybody continues to update their their available times, then that would be helpful. I don't know if, I haven't looked at it in a while. Has anybody else?
Is it somewhere in a email?
I actually,
Or is it,
it's on Google Drive.
okay, so it's on the Google.
I have it pulled up right now. I could share if you'd like to see it, or I could send, I can put the link to it in the chat if you guys want to look at it on your own. I don't know when the last time it's been updated, but
I think sharing it would be helpful if nobody's opposed.
I
We're not
think
gonna have it up, we're not gonna have it up for very long.
okay, let me try to do that.
I'm like-minded. I prefer early evenings. Midday is very difficult.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I work at night. So I work Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 3 p.m. till 9.
Oh, yeah, right.
Mondays, I have gymnastics from 4:30 until about 5:15.
Can you guys see that?
Okay, well, your voice is important too, so.
Well, everybody's is important,
Yes,
and I'm
yeah, everybody.
here, so I'm just saying. I mean, like, there's no way for me to change my schedule, like as of right now. Like that is my schedule. So
Mine's a little bit where I can play with it a little. I think I also saw that he would understand if we couldn't
Yeah,
accommodate
he said
him.
he would try it, and
Yeah, Yeah.
he did say that he absolutely wouldn't. do
Yeah, the
it.
times that Arvind put on this schedule look different than the ones he just sent us in his email today. So it's not clear. I guess we should go with the ones he just sent us today.
Well, he said that was his preference. And I think that that would be easiest for him, but I think he said he would still try and do it at the other
Okay.
time.
I see. So then we should go with the ones that are here then, probably.
the thing is I believe that with what's there, this is the only time that we are all supposedly available.
Yeah, this was the only time that we could come up with right now.
Literally.
the ones with us that are still on the commission. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're correct, everybody. Should we just
I mean,
take,
this time still works for me. Is there anyone it doesn't work for? Is there anyone not here today who said they couldn't come at this time?
no, it's just not a preference, but that's okay. Lots of things in life aren't preferences.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I'd rather not do. So I agree with you.
Exactly. Exactly.
I prefer to have blonde hair and blue eyes, but
So would somebody like to, do we want to do?
I would like to put a motion on the floor that we adopt the permanent schedule of the same thing that we've been doing. The second, what is it? The second Thursday is the work day and the fourth Thursday is the
regular meeting.
from 12 to 2. Yeah, I suggest that. Be done with it. But feel free to make amendments.
Does anybody second that motion?
I second.
So it sounds like we have a regular meeting time being the last Thursday of the month, or is it always the fourth? Need to get out of my full screen. Now, is that going to be the fourth? What about if there's 5 Thursdays in a month?
Or we could keep it just like
The fourth Thursday.
I'm
Or
sorry, more than one person was talking and I didn't catch either one of you. So
It would still be the fourth Thursday. I mean,
that's what I proposed.
I
The
thought
second
that's what we were
or-
talking about.
There's always a fourth Thursday, not always the fifth Friday. It's fifth Thursday.
Exactly. So fourth is good. So then on the work session, it would be the second Thursday if we have them. And I don't think
Right.
we have to, I don't think we have to have work sessions every month, but if we were going to, it would be the second Thursday.
I believe that is what I am saying, yes.
Okay. All right. So that's a done deal.
Let's
I mean,
vote.
Should we vote? Because
Yeah,
we
we-
had
yeah.
to,
No, we'll vote. We'll vote. I just need the screen. I need the screen back. If I could, please, Becky. Brett, thank you. Thank you very much. So who's in favor of having the meetings at those times?
I am.
That's Kamala says yes, or
Aye.
Commissioner Brown Sparks, excuse me. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3. And the person who suggested it for, it looks like all of us, so 5, or is it 6? To 0. So the motion passes. And it's back to you, Commissioner Brown Sparks. I believe it's item 6 with guest speaker.
but somehow it disappeared.
So it's the guest speaker.
Well, Commissioner Ratson, I would like you to do that.
Oh, that's fine. And I asked him to join our meeting at 12:30, so he's not here yet. But if we have some time, I just messaged you before he gets here. Is Stephen Lucas here? And if not, can you or I share what he's mentioned about the new clarification for the interpretation of the quorum rules for this commission?
Oh, you can talk about that. We just mentioned it a little bit, but you could definitely go over that.
Okay, is that okay with anyone for me to talk about that? It's not on the agenda.
We talked about it.
Becky,
I
would you like
I
to-
just
Becky,
read what his clarification was, but it would be much better
Okay.
if you went over it because you have gone into it more in depth than I have with him.
Okay, yeah, and I just wanted to update everyone that after our last meeting, I messaged Mr. Lucas and asked him if he could research and clarify for me the legal basis for that interpretation, which he used in our last 2 meetings where he said we couldn't vote because we didn't have a quorum and they counted the empty seats in the number that's required to establish
What?
the quorum. And I followed up on him with that because I've been serving on another commission with the city for a couple of years and we've never done it that way. And that commission also has several empty seats. And he did research and he found out that in fact, we do not need to count the empty seats for establishing a quorum. And the only thing he wanted to caution was if it turned out that we only had very few people on the commission who were making like really important decisions that were going to affect lots of people, that may be frowned upon. But, I think we can face that. We can tend to address that if that happens. But for now, at least, we hopefully can get some things done because we haven't been able to achieve quorum before now because of the other way of counting the empty seats really was stacked against us. So anyway, now we can at least achieve quorum more easily.
Thank you very much for that.
It is very appreciated.
Since we have a few minutes before the guest speaker, I can jump to the item number 7 on the agenda. I just wanted to clarify a few things if you guys are okay with that.
That would be great.
Okay, I wanted to talk, first I want to apologize for the mix-up. I had some family issues and I was not working. And so I did not get the notice out in time. By the time I realized it was too late. So, because it needs to go out 48 hours in advance.
Right.
So that's on me. I apologize. I wasn't even thinking about work. But now that we have a regular schedule, I should be able to put everything on the calendar and that won't be a problem anymore. But I did want to talk briefly about the bylaws. You guys have spent, quite a bit of time working on them. And it's kind of putting other things on hold until the bylaws are done. Well, I talked to Stephen a little bit about that. And he wanted to make sure that you guys understood that there are already default bylaws in place. So they're not like an emergency type thing. Based on the Bloomington Code and the Roberts Rules of Order, everything that we would discuss in the bylaws, or if anything comes up, there's code or rules that already apply. And I understand that the commission is trying to, really dive into the rules and make sure that it's equitable and inclusive. But I just wanted to let you know that it's not an emergency thing. Stephen also pointed out that you don't have to have all of the bylaws complete before you can vote on one, make one vote and move on. We can do it in parts. So as you saw, Camille and I discussed this last week. As you saw on the agenda, we just took out a piece. So one of the pieces was, the regular meeting time, which can now be added to the bylaws. And actually, I don't know if we should, but and then the second one was just how to structure the committee. And that way we can just pass them in pieces, or the commission can pass things in pieces. So we don't have to put all of the focus on the bylaws. So I did want to say that. And then I also wanted to discuss really quick about the role of the chair. I know there's been conversation about the commission does not want to have a hierarchy structure. And I just wanted to let you know the chair does not necessarily need to be that way. The commission can decide what the role of the chair is. I'm sorry, there's somebody in the waiting room. Let me get them. So if the chair, and I know that word might be changed. I'm sorry, I assume the person that's just come on is our guest speaker. So
That's likely him.
That's right. That's me. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me hit the rename here.
Well, while he does that, I just wanted to, you to know that we need a chair just to facilitate meetings. That's an absolute important part. But other than that, you can decide what the chair's role is. And we are here, the council office is here to help in any way we can. And what we do for the city council is we assist the president by creating the agenda. And we create the agenda based on feedback on input from all the members and based on what has been discussed in the previous meetings. And we work with whoever the chair is to create the agenda, and then they just need to approve it. So we are here to help. So I just wanted to let you know that the chair role is not it doesn't necessarily have to be a leadership type role. But that's all I wanted to say on that. So, and I will.
Thank you very much for that, Becky.
You're welcome. Did that make sense? I don't know if you have any questions. Or...
Absolutely.
It made sense to me.
Okay.
We'll talk about it when we get there. I'm
okay.
Anxious to hear about our guest.
Kamala, shall I introduce Mr.
Yes.
Vitale?
Yes, go ahead, like we had planned
Okay.
before. Go ahead.
Is this, how do you pronounce your last name? I don't want.
That was
is it
pretty good.
Vitale?
Vitale.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. Great. And it's nice to meet you virtually. I'm just going to read your bio here to introduce you. We are joined today by Alex S. Vitale. He's a professor of sociology and the coordinator of policing and social justice project at Brooklyn College and a visiting professor at London South Bank University. He has spent the last 25 years writing about policing and consults both police departments and human rights organizations internationally. He also serves on the New York State Advisory Committee of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Professor Vitale is the author of City of Disorder, How the Quality of Life Campaign Transformed New York Politics, and The End of Policing, which many of us have read in anticipation of his visit here today. His academic writings on policing have appeared in Policing and Society, Police Practice and Research, Mobilization, and Contemporary Sociology. He's also a frequent essayist whose writings have appeared in the New York Times, New York Daily News, The Nation, Vice, Jacobin, and USA Today. Thank you very much for joining us, Alex, to brief our newly formed commission on your work and answer any questions.
Great.
I'll let
Well,
you take over.
thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to help with this important work that you're engaged in. I don't know if anyone mentioned, but I was in Bloomington not too long ago. I spoke at both the university and at the Indiana Harm Reduction Coalition that's not far from campus. So I'm by no means an expert on what's going on in Bloomington, but I also have some general familiarity with the community there and have connections with people both at the university and outside of it. It's not my intention here today to give you advice that is specifically targeted to the local dynamics there. I don't claim to have that level of expertise. So I wanted to, I guess, as I understand your charge, just talk a little bit about my vision about what we should be doing about public safety that is better on a national scale than what we do now. What we do now, for the most part, is that we've defined public safety as being within the remit of primarily one agency, the police department. In fact, in some states, it's an office of public safety, or we use that language often to describe them. But this is, I think, a fundamental flaw, is that there are specific things that are within the nature of policing that at times may be contradictory with the production of true public safety. And interestingly, my friend and colleague Nicole Siegel, who was there at the University of Indiana, wrote an excellent book, the first chapter of which, the introduction to which, lays out the case that we need to think about police as violence workers. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, what distinguishes policing from other government agencies is the capacity and legal authorization to use force. That's really the thing that's distinctive about policing. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are the implications for that specific characteristic of the institution? And this is something that policing scholars have been writing about since, Rodney King and before, is how is that unique characteristic shape the worldview, the culture, the bureaucratic functioning of that institution? And is that really the best set of characteristics for being the primary or sole agency responsible for producing public safety. So when we authorize a bureaucracy to have this capacity to use violence, that comes with certain institutional consequences. We see this not just in policing, but we see this in military bureaucracies as well. And that is, it produces a culture of insularity, a culture of defensiveness. It creates this very tight-knit world that tends to have a kind of oppositional view towards those that are on the receiving end of that violence. And this is not to say that all police violence is unlawful or unjust or anything like that. This is even the most sort of tightly regulated, well-behaved, well-trained department is still going to have these characteristics. There's something about that capacity and authorization to use violence that shapes the culture of the institution and contributes to a culture of impunity, defensiveness, an us versus them worldview. In addition, it tends to produce what we might call a kind of Manichaean worldview, a somewhat black and white, which is unfortunately additionally apt in this analysis. But this idea that the world is divided up into good people and bad people. And since we've told them that as violence workers, you're responsible for producing public safety, that plays into the idea that the way we produce safety is through the constant mobilization of coercion, threats, and violence. And it's important to remember that even when an officer spends their entire career without even, removing their firearm on duty, that does not mean they're not violence workers. Because every time a police officer enters a room, pulls someone over, talks to someone on the street, everyone in that encounter understands crystal clearly that failure to comply with that officer runs the potential of resulting in violence. And that's just not true when I have an interaction with another type of government worker. So if we understand that this is just the inherent nature of policing, this leads us to draw some functional conclusions, which are we should be extremely cautious about our desire to turn over certain areas of responsibility to them. This is not to say that there couldn't possibly be any appropriate function for violence workers, but we should view them as a tool of absolute last resort. That's my assessment. So that means that, and this is the exact opposite of what we've been doing the last couple of generations, which is we've been turning to them as the tool of first resort for a growing list of government functions. Kids are coming into the schools with problems and being disruptive. Well, let's bring in school police. We have an opioid crisis. Let's hand that to the police to manage. We've got a horrible national homelessness crisis. Well, let's give that to police to manage, right? So we had this situation in Dallas. I don't know if people recall, but several years ago, a number of officers were killed by someone. And the chief at the time came out and held a press conference and he said, we've got a real problem here, which is that we're being asked to do too much. Every problem in Dallas is being turned over to the police. The schools don't work. They want us in the schools. There's no mental health services. They want us to take that on. They want us to chase loose dogs, he said. Now they got us in charge of loose dogs, right? And he says, we can't do all those things. And when we do attempt to do all those things, we just alienate the community because we don't have the real solutions to those problems. Okay, so that's, that's the underlying analysis that has guided a lot of my work on this subject. And this is what I've seen firsthand. And it's now been 30 years of doing this work. That introduction was from when the book came out about 4 years ago. And so what I see is that when you look at what police actually do, not what we see on television, where they're chasing serial killers and bank robbers, but when we look at what they actually do all day, they're micromanaging the lives of the most vulnerable people in our communities, whose disordered lives do sometimes have a negative impact on the rest of us. They can be a source of disorder or disruption, or what we conventionally think of as crime. And interestingly, a lot of what police do in managing those populations has very little connection to what the formal law says, right? Move along, don't sit there, I'm going to take you over here. This is not in response to a specific legal violation. It's about the management of suspect, vulnerable, disruptive, disorderly populations, however you want to think about it. So the question is, how much of that functionality can we address in better ways that don't come with the collateral consequences of utilizing violence workers? So I know you, for instance, had a presentation in July from folks in Denver who are running the STARS program there, which is on the leading edge of exactly this effort to try to rethink why we've turned every social problem under the sun over to police to manage. And the initial results in Denver look very good. They mirror results that we've seen from longer standing programs. And we have a growing list of cities that are implementing or are in the planning stages of implementing similar programs. I was recently in Houston the other day, where Harris County has decided to implement a very wide scale version of this. And Harris County is, one of the largest population centers in the country. So this is not a fringe idea that a few small towns are thinking about. We've got a pilot program here in New York City. There's one in San Francisco. The LA is beginning to explore these things. And I think that the logic, the need for this is now pretty well established. Between 1.5 quarters of all people killed by police in the United States are having a mental health crisis. Whether it's whether this and the police interactions, it could be a welfare check or what we in New York call an EDP, an emotionally disturbed person. And we just know that in the vast majority of these calls, no police involvement is necessary. And this is a big leap because, right, for so long, we've been told, well, the police are in charge of that. They're the experts. They know what public safety is. So then when we ask them, oh, can we remove you from mental health interventions? They say, well, no, of course not. That's what we do. And if you remove us, you're going to have all these horrible, violent outcomes. Well, they, of course, are speaking from a particular perspective, in addition to a set of bureaucratic self-interests. There's a kind of deeper problem here, which is that it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that the decision to have a police intervention is often what triggers worse outcomes, right? So turns out that when someone's having a mental health crisis, they're not usually very excited to see an armed uniformed police officer show up, because that means that they could be subjected to arrest, violence, or forced hospitalization, none of which they want. From a person that generally they have no prior history with, no relationship with, and that person does not have access to any of the things that might actually help the person having a crisis reach some kind of better situation. They don't have access to real community-based mental health services. They themselves are not capable of providing the kind of trauma management, acute response, things that someone might need. They're not able to provide peer-to-peer advice to calm someone down. And of course, one of the things we learn is that many times when a family member calls these, for assistance, the last thing they expected to get was an armed police officer. That's not what they were calling for. That's not what they want. And unfortunately, in too many cases, the outcomes are tragic. So now the question is, well, what else? What are the limits to this analysis? My view is we don't know what the limits are to this, but we have some pretty obvious beginning points, right? We need to create these kinds of mental health crisis teams that could also, as in Oregon, respond to a homeless person in crisis, someone having perhaps a substance use crisis, whether it's alcohol or paint thinner or ecstasy or whatever it is, right? Police are not well equipped to respond to these calls. They get some training, but of course, they're fighting the war on drugs. And the person who is being responded to knows they're fighting the war on drugs. So there's automatically a barrier to communication, cooperation, sharing of important details. The whole dynamic is colored in a negative way by the fact that that person is also in charge of the criminal prosecution of people. Okay, I see Renee is in strong agreement about that point. Yes. So let's get them, we should not be sending police on potential overdose calls or really anyone who's just on the street, let's say, having a moment of crisis. Look, police officers, a lot of them, they're motivated by perfectly reasonable motivations. They think they're trying to help. Many of them really make an extra effort. They can be very effective communicators and problem solvers within the limitations that they have institutionally. So, I'm a police scholar. I work with police all the time. This is not motivated by some view that, well, police are all bad guys. And it's really an institutional structural analysis about the limits of that institution. So some other areas that I think are important where we've seen other cities moving in this direction are getting police out of routine traffic enforcement. I've just recently done events in Rochester, in Minneapolis. Berkeley is moving forward with this. So that's very exciting. One of the issues here, right, is that a lot of the so-called routine traffic enforcement has nothing to do with traffic safety. It's about what we call pretextual stops that are really about searching for drugs, occasionally for weapons. These stops are notoriously ineffective, very low what we call hit rates. The racially disparate outcomes are both shocking and not at all surprising at the same time. When we give officers broad discretion to find the bad guys, it turns out most of them are black and brown in their minds. So yes, Kamala is shocked. So we need to look at traffic calming strategies to address actual traffic safety issues. I think there is some role for automated technology here with, the cautionary notes that need to go along about, well, which neighborhoods are being flooded with these devices? What's the impact on people's finances? What's the burden on already financially unstable communities and individuals? So I think, that has to be taken very seriously. But most traffic enforcement, even when it is narrowly targeting actual dangerous traffic behavior, has not been shown to improve traffic safety. It doesn't actually work very well. Even when we just limit it to something like speed enforcement or target, So one of the arguments for taking traffic enforcement out of the police department is that police are not traffic engineers. Let's give that to the traffic people, because they are the ones who should be taking reports, analyzing collisions, so that they can feed that information back into, well, maybe we need a stop sign here, or maybe we need a speed bump, or maybe we need to narrow the intersection, right? It also needs to feed back to the fact that we've produced urban environments that require too many people to drive individual passenger vehicles. So we need to think about, well, part of the reason we have so many collisions and unsafe driving is because too many people are driving. And if we look at Europe, we see much lower collision rates, much lower fatality rates, because people have access to high quality, affordable, and very functional public transit.
in Japan.
And of course, the burden of inadequate transit tends to fall disproportionately on exactly the communities that are subjected to disproportionate traffic stops. And part of this is because they have old out-of-service vehicles that are more likely to have a taillight out or an exhaust problem, or to look shabby and draw the attention of police. Well, if a lot of these people, I think, would much rather be taking high quality public transit instead of trying to keep an old car afloat that's nickel and diming them to death. So that you know, so that when we turn traffic enforcement over to the police, it just erases all these other considerations for us. We need to keep police out of the schools. We need a complete rethink on the war on drugs. We need to look at something like the Ithaca plan. I don't know if you've seen that in your research yet. Yes, Renee has, so that's great. I think that's a really interesting model that was developed with support from the Drug Policy Alliance that involved a lot of focus groups and community consultation, not just experts sitting in a room, to try to think holistically about how a very analogous kind of town, right? A medium to small size city with a major university. How can we think holistically about the harms that are associated with substance use in our community? And I don't suggest you just take their plan, right? I suggest you adopt their process of thinking about this holistically in ways that make sense for Bloomington, which is not the same as Ithaca, even though there are analogies, right? And I think we could do this with other problems as well. Police spend a lot of their time taking property crime reports and very little time solving property crime. The vast majority of burglaries are not reported, and when they are, most are not even investigated, and very small number are ever solved. And yet we persist in this idea that, well, policing is how we're going to address this. Turns out the vast majority of residential burglaries are driven by the need to get money to buy drugs on the black market. So if we wanted to do something about property crime, car break-ins, residential burglaries, a lot of petty larcenies, shoplifting, a lot of this is driven not by a simplistic idea of, well, they're poor, they need money for food. These are folks with highly disordered lives that are tied to their poverty, but are more specifically motivated by the need to get money to buy drugs. So if we had a real comprehensive, holistic strategy to manage those drug-related problems, and of course, a lot of drug use is not problematic in the sense of its impact on the rest of us, then this would reduce our need for a whole policing apparatus that is incredibly ineffective at responding to the problem anyway. And to the extent that people need a report for their insurance, this could all be done by civilians, including giving advice to people about how to improve security in their homes, et cetera. This could all be done by civilians. There's no need for an armed police officer to make that response. Excuse me. One other area I'll just mention is that, we see a growing number of cities implementing strategies to address gun violence independently of policing. This includes things like the advanced peace model, the cure violence model, credible messengers, a whole host of youth interventions, things that are hospital-based, things that are community-based. We can go into details on this. I don't know what the patterns of that kind of violence look like for Bloomington. This may not be a top concern. I hope that's true, that this is not a major problem there, but if it is, there are a lot of things that can be done there. All right, so last thing is, how can we approach this bureaucratically? Well, I think we should look carefully at what's going on in Minneapolis. Now, everyone made a big hoopla when a little over a year ago they said, oh, we're going to get rid of the police department, or at least that's how it was talked about in the media. And then they didn't do it the next day, and everyone's like, oh, see, nothing happened in Minneapolis, it's all over. No, the city council voted last month to create a charter amendment that'll be before voters in November to change the city charter to basically eliminate the position of the police department as so labeled within city government, and instead create a Department of Public Safety that is a civilian agency that oversees the work of the health department, environmental protection, youth services, and yes, uniformed police. But the uniformed police work for that agency, which is then under the control of the mayor and the city council. The old city charter demanded, minimum staffing levels, said they only reported to the mayor, right? All these ways that they insulate themselves from any accountability. So voters will have a chance to decide in November whether or not they want to open the door to rethinking the overall approach to public safety. A number of other communities are either community-based groups are arguing for it, or city governments themselves are exploring these ideas. So what that does is it just decenters this idea that the lead agency, the only agency that we could possibly mobilize to address public safety concerns, is the police department. And instead, it allows us to think more holistically. So we have some people at the top of this agency who are like, oh, there's an opioid crisis, there's an uptick in overdoses. What can we do with the health department? What can we do with the schools? What can we do with youth services? But when we turn it over to the police department, their response is, let's mobilize the narcotics units to go out and arrest a bunch of people. And we know that's just not effective. It's just not effective. And comes with all kinds of collateral consequences. All right, so I've spoken for about half an hour. That gives you some sense of my overview, where I'm coming from. I'm happy to share some specific resources if I have them that you think are useful. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions. And who's am I calling on people?
I don't know. I don't know who's facilitating.
We're a small group, so just go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start off the questions. Sorry, I got to get my notes pulled back up here. Okay, here they are. So our city, our mayor and city recently just proposed the new budget for next year, and it includes an increase for the police budget, and specifically its increases not to necessarily have more police than before, but to simply fill the positions that they have open, because apparently they have a very high turnover rate here in Bloomington, and so we keep having to just train new officers every year or two. And so several city council members' response was, well, we should pay them even more money for you know, high, what do you call the entry level pay should be higher. And our city, and so first of all, what is your reaction to that? And secondly, do you think the alternative models, because we have a very small model of social worker response embedded within our local city police department, that has, you know, been doing wonderful things. But my concern and question is, should that be embedded within the police department as opposed to being operated independently of it? Thank you. Those are two questions, I guess.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, obviously, I would want to really interrogate the increases to police spending, even if it's to maintain the same head count. But really, the answer to both questions is, what's the overall vision about how to produce public safety? And what you're getting in those two questions is the sense that they still think this is all something the police are in charge of. And then they can get some help from other people. And my whole thing is, we've got to flip that on its head and say, police should not be in charge of this. And once we make that decision, then the mental health workers and social workers are not working for the police department anymore. They're working for this other agency that the police department is also working for. And, you know, one of the things we know is that these co-response models are not nearly as good as non-police responses. You know, but we're so captured by this idea that it all has to be under the control of the police department, even though the evidence doesn't suggest that that's a good way to handle it. Nicole, was that a hand up?
It is. Okay, so I've done a little bit of digging in Indiana to compare our area on a couple of things, just because out of me running across it. And so there's some things that I find unique to Bloomington's area, right? So Bloomington has we have our county sheriffs, and then we have our Bloomington police, and then we have our university police. Then we also have our township firehouses, right? Or that's usually where that goes, is in the townships, right? In the county. Now, EMS has been outsourced in Bloomington. Around the state, that is either done by the township or the county, depending on the size of the county. But in the Bloomington area, all EMS is IU Health. Okay, so our EMS is completely outsourced in a private organization. We actually have a worse response to the homeless with the EMS than we do with the police officer. Okay, because of that. That being said, they have also outsourced, like, okay, so our township trustees, like if you have a homeless individual who, I mean, they have outsourced everything. If they don't have someone to be their Social Security payee to get, because they're disabled and they need to get their money and they're homeless, right? The township trustee, as the overseer of the poor across the state, does that. Well, in Monroe County, somehow they don't. I'm not really sure how they get around that, but like they have, again, Centerstone does that, like private organizations. So all these private organizations have fulfill these city roles. And like when we tried to pass Ordinance 2006 earlier this year, which was a human bill of rights for people who are homeless, well, people who slept outside, period, like whatever reason. The city government or the legal department, like when directly asked, like, you know, like, where does someone safely, you know, sleep outside? They basically said that that's not within the parameter of their job to provide that. And then we have, that has all been turned over to nonprofits. And one of them is a very large Christian nonprofit, which a lot of our homeless individuals have they don't want to go there because they are pushed into what they say is a religious environment, even though the organization swears that's not what's happening. the people like with you, so it's not, there's empty beds there. Long and the short, like our government, our our mayor has thrown away all of our public safety. Okay, everywhere, like on purpose, like, and the only thing left in the city government is policing. And so they don't, and we do have a commission on public safety that is made up of a fire person, a police person, you know, like, and so that does exist. But other than that, like, that's it. Like, and so everything else is outsourced. No one talks to each other. Working this winter through COVID all last year with the houseless population, the fact that no organizations in town are talking to each other was like, when I figured that out, like that nobody is even like, we're having all these meetings, like we are having this meeting here and there's somebody else having a meeting about a similar topic and nobody knows it. And that information never gets, it's insane. Like we just don't talk to anybody in Bloomington, each other.
So if you had a real public safety office, right, they could coordinate those activities and
But
think
that's
about it more holistically.
Right. That's been given to United Way to figure out.
Mhm.
United Way has now organized this whole like coming home plan. And I tried to be part of that. They actually asked me to be part of that. I was part of that for the first meeting for the first 15 minutes, offered a suggestion and was told we couldn't do it. And after 20 to 40 minutes of discussion, someone else in the meeting who was on the board offered the same suggestion and everybody was like, great. And I never went back. So, you know, like that's where we are in Bloomington. There's a major disconnect. Year-round residents and families. I live in public housing. I'm also the vice president of the Bloomington Housing Authority Residents Council. We have gun violence here. We have a problem, especially since they built a second high-rise that is over half Section 8, 2 blocks away from us. So now there's turf wars. It's wonderful. Buy a park. Anyway, so yeah, we've got some stuff happening and nobody wants to really, right now, even everybody is like, we have to listen to the experts in the city. Like, and the experts are the people who have been studying the lab rats instead of listening to the lab rats. It's like, hello, we speak. We're not, you know, like you stop watching our behavior and talk to us. So like, and that is what we are up against seriously here. And I don't even know like how, like, I mean, I loved all of these areas like that you pointed out that like to work on. But I'm like at a loss. Like our MCC meeting last night, our school board meeting, 2 people got up and like they literally had to call a recess because somebody pulled a mask off their face and started throwing fits, you know. So like to even the idea of getting cops out of schools, we're pretty conservative.
Well, I think the overall strategy here has to be focused on the issue of public safety. And as you pointed out, it sounds like the existing administration is vulnerable on this point, right? That they're not producing public safety and that they are thinking about it in ways that are much too narrow and uncoordinated. And so the struggles that I've seen that have looked more successful have been, we are the public safety experts. We actually are struggling with these issues. We have concrete, holistic strategies that are going to be better than just turning this over to one agency. Renee?
Well, it's disjointed, like Nicole, Commissioner Johnson said, and it is very disjointed. It still falls on the police department because everything is under the police department. For example, they just suggested that we have civilian groups go out and they're under the police budget. The suggestion is, let's have civilian groups go out and help people, but yet they still want it to be under the police purview. They won't give away that to to a group that actually knows what they're doing. And they're not here listening to us right now, which they could be. I mean, we are the people that are the disenfranchised people. This commission is the people that make up these groups. That's why we were chosen for this commission. Each and every one of us have a reason for being here, but they choose not to be here to listen to us. So I find that disheartening. But why have civilian groups that are under the police department? We're going to now have another group that's under the police department. Everybody falls under the police department. The EMS falls under the police department. Every single thing falls under them. So I believe, I like the idea of having a public safety entity, but it can't be under the police department. The police department needs to be way down here. Okay. We don't need to have them elevated. Every budget cycle, I hear, we need more money. We need to fix this. We need to give them $30,000 or whatever the dollar amount really is for housing, and do this and that for them, and buy them more military weapons, and buy a Bearcat, and protect our 90 whatever police officers that we have. I just, it's very frustrating here in Bloomington. To every time we go to a budget meeting, and they're happening right now, by the way, that we have council members that are just begging for more money for these helpless police officers. I'm not saying that they don't do good work, but they have, but also I'm not saying they are. They're overworked doing things they shouldn't be doing, like you well know. Traffic stops, come on. That's just a reason to stop somebody to search them. And why are you doing that? So they can lose housing? So they can get further and further behind, and more people will be poor, and then we'll have more homeless people? Come on, we all know what's happening here. It's keeping the wheels greased, and it's just tragic. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of ranting, but my bottom line, I think, is a question for you would be, what do you suggest, and how would you go about having us even start with a dialogue with the city to get them to hear that what they're doing isn't working, and to come up with a plan that could be more cohesive so everybody isn't so disjointed.
So do you feel like you have some allies on the city council?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, my general advice, without knowing the specific landscape there in more detail, is that it's not, you may not be ready to play all your cards to try to push the mayor in a particular direction. You may need to step back a bit and bolster your base in the communities. And so one way you could do that is to have some well orchestrated town hall meetings, public forums, that sort of thing, where you take on some of the specific public safety issues that we've been talking about today. Let's put a panel together on traffic enforcement, and let's bring in both some outside experts and some community people who can talk firsthand about why this is not working and what could be better. And let's shop that around in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do one on the war on drugs and opioid overdoses and the whole thing. You've got some great potential partners there, and say, look, what would a holistic strategy look like that's not just the police department? And see if you can build up a constituency for these ideas and kind of out organize the mayor in a sense.
Thank you.
That would be my advice.
Okay.
Yeah, Naila?
Thanks. It's pronounced Najla. You say the J.
Najla, okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, yeah, I really appreciate you answering our questions so early in our process. That we're still obviously, trying to get some traction. And what what is your experience with those peer-to-peer or community neighborhood-based public safety systems? I particularly work with neurodiversity advocacy groups, and I've heard of some really promising approaches where they even try to have people like volunteer to go out and talk with people who may be having a mental health crisis, who maybe have that same neurotype or mental illness, or, you know, have experienced those kinds of things. Do you have any programs to point towards who are good models for that? And I mean, having it based, the word I'm trying to get to is where it's more locally based, where it's either based by a community or peer-to-peer, like you say, based on your identity, right? And then obviously, do you have any systems to recommend that are outside of police departments? And
Oh,
the
sorry.
other, go ahead, and then I have one more after that. Okay.
Take your
Okay.
time, Naja, take your time.
Yeah,
Okay.
so-
Yeah, I'll let him answer.
Yeah, so just so I don't forget, right? So yes, we do have some models out there, and I can send you a few things to look at. In LA County, they're trying to get more of these peer-to-peer respite centers. So the idea here is to have a kind of stepped set of services. So right now, what we often have for folks who don't have like high quality private medical care is that you dial 911 and if you're lucky, you end up in an emergency room, right? And so what we need is to think about, well, what's the lowest intensity, lowest barrier? And then what's after that and what's after that? And maybe at the very end of that is an emergency room, which is, of course, emergency room is the most expensive option. So the public advocate here in New York wrote a pretty good report on this. And this is a model that was developed in Italy that creates these stepped responses. And so you start with peer-to-peer respite centers so that if someone, first of all, you don't want people to wait until they're in total crisis before they ask for help. Hopefully people have access to routine care, but that also when they begin to think they have a problem, they feel there's somewhere safe and appropriate for them to go. So that would be a peer-to-peer center that's not staffed by clinicians necessarily, though there might be someone available, advisory capacity, but a place someone can go to just hang out. Like, I got to get out of my house, right? And they have a place you can hang out. And sometimes they have a couple of beds upstairs where you could stay for a day or two. That's it, right? You can talk to the people there. Well, here's like what I'm thinking about medication. Here's what I'm thinking about talk therapy. Here's what I'm thinking about, what other services. And then the person can say, okay, if you want to go to the medical route, we can make an appointment for you to see someone who can prescribe medication. If you want talk therapy, we can make an appointment for that. If you think you need some housing benefits or something, well, we'll connect you with a social worker who can do that. And then maybe they need something more intensive. They got to go see the doctor, get some meds, maybe have a bed for a few days until the meds kick in. But it's voluntary, right? And it's low threshold and it's low intensity and you don't have to lock anyone in, right? Because they're there voluntarily. And then, maybe we have some locked facilities and emergency rooms for a very, very small number of most extreme cases. But when you do these other things, it turns out you don't really need very much of that top level stuff. So
Yeah, thank
LA,
you. Yeah.
New York has got proposals, but no real plan in place. So I'll send you a few. I'll send you a few things to look at.
Thanks. Yeah, the closest thing we have, I think, are 2 day centers for the unhoused in our community that are both run by 2 different Christian organizations.
Yeah.
That are not city run.
And
And
not
I agree,
peer-to-peer.
I agree that they should be. No, no, I'm sure they're not. Thank you. And my other question is, one thing I think that, I don't know if it's a unique problem to us, but it's something I've certainly noticed since living here that is greatly concerning. I noticed in your book that you mention a lot about the freedom of movement, which is restricted by many policing systems. And this is greatly concerning to me in our community because since I've lived here for 20 years, I've watched the homeless community move from mostly being visible at People's Park, which is literally right at the campus gates, right? It's a block from campus gates, if you remember, if you've been here.
Yeah.
It's right, okay. That's where they were 20 years ago. That's where they were allowed to be. And this mayor particularly has removed those people. I think it happened 5 or 6 years ago. They moved them, and then they were at the next closest city park at Seminary. And then they've been evicted from there multiple times. They've moved down farther to under the bridge, and then they got moved farther down, and they keep moving. Now they're moving to my neighborhood, to Switchyard Park. They're all over farther south of town. As you mentioned in your book, this not only restricts these citizens' freedom of movement, but it also pushes the problem into poorer neighborhoods, which is what this city has done again and again. It's got, they recently even hired private security at the park now to try to then get the homeless out of the park using private security, which is something that our commission is planning to take issue with, because I don't think there should be any private security working in our to remove people from our public spaces. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, on reclaiming our cities? I mean, our public places for our citizens. Have you seen any cities have luck with that? And I guess, what are your general suggestions on that problem, which to me seems like a major problem in this city?
So part of the issue here is that, you want to use this against the mayor in terms of building a narrative around public safety in the community. So you can say, look, the mayor has no plan to address homelessness. His plan is to drive the problem out of the center into our communities.
And outsource it to other
And then
organizations.
outsource, right? So it's all about austerity. It's all about, he can continue to make his little real estate deals downtown,
Everyone,
right?
Every time.
And paper over the problem by forcing it out of sight into the outlying and more vulnerable neighborhoods. So you got to build common cause among the communities that are bearing the brunt of this, who are not benefiting from these little real estate deals that they're running downtown. So that's my advice about this. So this has been an ongoing battle in places like Seattle and San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, where there are these big battles about the use of public space. There's currently, I think, litigation underway in San Francisco over this issue of stay away orders and stuff in the Tenderloin district there. So try Googling that and see what you find.
Thank you.
do you have any particularly, I don't know, suggestions on, I mean, definitely like the narrative is being built. He is outsourcing our public safety. And in my opinion, I believe that we should be taking more of a harm reductionist approach to all public safety and meeting where they are, which is a direct different viewpoint. And I just like, I mean, I feel like point A and point B are so far apart. Like, yes, your ideas, all of these ideas would definitely move those things into that direction. But in this particular city, like, I mean, I am just overwhelmed at the amount of outsourcing and the amount of we just don't have the constituency despite like running, you know what I mean? Like, or people who would be thinking differently, or like we don't have a large group of people who are willing to fill these public seats because nobody wants to police, nobody wants to be in charge, because nobody, yes, this is like a thing, like, we can't, you know what I mean? Like nobody that would want to, wants to run, that we would want,
Right.
nobody would run for sheriff or for police chief or whatever. Well, I've been appointed, but you know what I'm saying? Like, who we would potentially want in that position. And so like, it's like this catch-22 of how we manage around a more conservatively built government.
Can
And
I just add something when you're, oh, sorry.
That's it. That just, it's
Oh,
inside
yeah.
a college town. And I really feel like Bloomington is turning into an Airbnb for IU students. And it's got to, I mean, that really, and that's what it feels like. And it's got to stop.
You mean it isn't? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I can't solve all your political problems for you over a Zoom call, obviously. So
I don't even know where
Well,
to start.
I was just sorry. I was just going to clarify, to add on to what you said, Nicole, to maybe clarify a little bit to what the question maybe is. Like, for instance, the mayor has completely ignored the existence of our commission, this one,
We've
which was
gone
put
to his
together by the city council. What?
We've even gone to his house.
Yeah,
You know,
and
he admit, you know, like,
and so he set up his own alternative working group or task force for alternative policing that he wants to make recommendations to him that are all made up of the same people who are currently running all these Christian nonprofits and the police departments
Yeah,
and the
they're
public
handpicked.
safety.
They're
They're
handpicked.
the people who are currently embedded in the programs he set up. And so I guess maybe to add to clarify Nicole's question, maybe how can we possibly be make any headway in that kind of an environment? But I
Like that-
see, yeah.
like-
Do you have anything to add to your earlier suggestion
Well, I just
to
think,
kind of
you know,
out organize?
you have to build political power. And I think the two avenues to think about this is, one, building a base in the communities. And the other is maybe trying to find more allies at the university. Try to find those progressive students and progressive faculty members who actually don't just want to turn the city into an Airbnb and a set of restaurants to eat at, because I think they're there, and I don't know if you've spoken with Nicole Siegel yet, but obviously you need to have a conversation with her at some point, bring her in like this and engage her as well. And she'll know the landscape at the university in terms of potential allies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we do have groups that the city made groups and then city supported groups, but they have these gatekeepers. So maybe one poor person won't be able to get in while another poor person could. So I like the peer-to-peer group facilitation that you're talking about, because you can't get past the gatekeepers to these organizations locally, and that's problematic. There's a lot of that. There's some good there. It's sad. So I appreciate all of your suggestions today. I've taken copious notes, and I appreciate your time very much. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you again, and maybe you'll sit on one of our panels sometime.
Yes, or I'm happy to, but also let's find people who are more local, who can speak to the local dynamics, and I'm happy to help find those people. But also, I think Nicole Siegel will be a great resource in this regard.
Yeah.
She'll know people around the whole region who do this work.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Nicole's amazing. She started to decarcerate Monroe County.
Yeah.
I think it's more statewide now, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for inviting me. And I'm sorry, Kamala, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Unfortunately, my professor, like my head professor and the professor at the head of the department where I was at, was one of the people that was there when they founded and began the Chicago School of Studies. And yeah, he asked me to tell about what it was like to grow up in a house with two single families of Black mothers, and what it was like for all the kids to live together, and then to tell about the Black church. And I said I couldn't do those things because I didn't grow up in that kind of household or only with Black people. I grew up in Bloomington and there were all kinds of people, and he wasn't very fond of that. So to read your book, I was so excited to read your book.
Thank you.
So thank you. And I just really appreciate it. It was really nice to see that somebody was coming from a different framework. And I really like the ideas of the wraparound schools and everything. I was really excited to read it.
Great.
So
Well,
thank you.
that's always music to an author's ears. So I'm very, very happy to hear that.
Oh, sorry.
go
I
ahead.
thought of another question too.
Yeah.
Do you overall, Alex, agree with our approach to kind of divide and conquer as far as policy areas, like you did with your book, as far as like mental health, substance abuse, like we've been doing here today? You kind of agree with that?
But I think if you did it under the framework of decentering policing and thinking about creating a different agency, maybe that might be the thing that pulls it together. But I think you could definitely go out and do things in the neighborhoods that are specific to these different issues, and then articulate why we don't need police and traffic enforcement, why we don't need them in the schools, et cetera.
I have a question. This is a little more theoretical because this is about the idea of ending policing and getting rid of that hierarchy, right? So we are in the middle of writing our bylaws, and I am staunchly against having a chair, co-chair, secretary following Robert's Rules of Order, blah, 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 blah. Do you have a suggestion that as a resource that we might look to as an alternative?
Well, just there are a number of guides out there about consensus decision making.
Mhm.
Aorta.
Yeah, so I think you can take a look at those. There's different models out there, modified consensus and things like that. So, yeah.
Do you think it's important for an organization such as ourselves to decolonize our bylaws?
I think it's great. I think if you run up against legal requirements to fill certain roles, that doesn't mean you have to actually operate under them. So you create whatever they tell you have to create, but then you make a decision amongst yourselves about how you're going to actually operate.
Right. But like, for example, and this is not to you, Becky, I know you're still here because Stephen said it, but Stephen, who is our legal helper, who helps, said that our bylaws aren't an emergency. And I feel like, considering the work that we're doing and the work that we're trying to move forward and the changes that we're trying to make, our bylaws are like the foundation. How can we suggest change to a system if we have not been able to change ourselves?
Bam.
And I'll leave that with that. Thanks. But, that's just basically where I'm coming from.
I'm sympathetic. Just you can't always wage every battle simultaneously. So you have to be
Especially if the other warriors don't show up on the field.
Yeah.
I hear that. And and like you said, I like the idea of piecing things out. And that's basically what we got, the advice that we got from the city as well. So I think really, honestly, between what your discussion with us today has really given us a lot of direction, whether you realize it or not. It's helped us understand and separate out exactly what we have on our table into like different piles, you know? So like it's less,
Overwhelming.
it doesn't feel, so I appreciate that for sure. And I also appreciate the fact that like you proved my point about our bylaws. So, and it just in basis of speaking today. So like, yeah, you don't even have to agree. But yes, we can take those bylaws on one at a time as well. So one at a time, bite at a time. That's how we eat elephants. And again, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. All right, well, and feel free to, you know, keep me updated, and I will send some examples of reports about, you know, comprehensive mental health strategies.
That would be great if you could do that.
Okay. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. It's sweltering hot here in New York, so I'm going to take this heavy dress shirt off and work on some tenure
Thank
letters.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Renee, could you take over for like a few minutes because my aide literally just got to my house and walked in the door?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we? Becky, would you like to finish up? I know you had started touching on the bylaws and officer roles. I think that's going to lead right into, be a good segue for the number 8 on the agenda, which is bylaws discussion. If you're still there.
Sure, yeah, I'm here. I think I touched on the 2 points that I wanted to bring up. I'm trying to remember how far I got. I'm having so much trouble with my computer. I apologize. It's so slow. I don't
You've
know.
got a lot going on too, so I appreciate your time.
I remember you basically saying that ultimately we're taking up too much time for bylaws and we need to do other things. Number one. And I get that. That's why. And then you gave the suggestion of breaking it up and breaking up the bylaws. And I like that suggestion a lot. So I think that moving forward, that is something that we could actually maybe think about adding as permanent points to our agenda, having one being a piece of the bylaw of whatever section we're working on, and then another being whatever section of all of these wonderful notes that we all just took after we get there. But you know what? Just like revisit the, you know what I mean? Revisit, and then we'll work underneath, you know, what has been given to us and what exists in real life in 2021 Bloomington City Council Code up until then. That's my suggestion.
And that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that it didn't have to be completely finished before being able to move on. So,
and that is great to know. I'm glad that we can vote on a piece at a time. That, like I said, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
And we had started with that, Nicole. And you were not, and so I'll catch you up on where we were with it. We had Becky put the bylaws, I think it was for the Commission of Women's bylaws up, and then we had decided as a commission to use that as a kind of a slate, and then we could change things as we went forward. And we were keeping just the stuff that we had to by city code, like you just said, okay? And so that's all we've done so far on the bylaws. So that's where we are.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out that I don't know if you saw the packet, I put in where we are now, like the latest version, as I understand it, of the bylaws. And I added the word facilitator instead of officers. It's just one that came to me. So I threw it in there, but it's obviously changeable. So
I love
I was gonna suggest that word. I have it written down, so I really like that. It's all about how aorta talks about anti-oppression facilitation
Exactly.
instead
And
of officers.
yeah, and we need a stack taker, and we need, or someone who says who's next to speak, and we need someone who's taking notes. That is, I mean, and those are our three positions. Like, other than that, and those I think should rotate on top of it. I think that we can either make those decisions at the beginning of each meeting, even by who's present. That's how true consensus operates. There's a lot of things, because I did notice the alternative 1, alternative 2, and I see an alternative. I see a third alternative there. So, and I know I wasn't here for the last meeting, and I do apologize, but I have been dealing with some major health issues in my family, and I will try not to miss again. But I'm just saying, those are, and again, I defer to the group. And I am looking, as far as like, when it comes down to it, I also do believe that we should be very concerned about voting on bylaws with a 3-2 vote. So, like, I think we need all of our members present and accounted for in order to get a 5 out of 8. At least since we are smaller than we're supposed to be right now. So I do feel that way about the bylaws in particularly.
Well, I kind of like how we weren't real strict with the Roberts rules today. That in itself is, in my opinion, a way less oppressive way to run a meeting than Robert's rules, which is racist in and of itself. And I will forever think that. Nobody's going to change my mind about that. So anyway, I don't think that offered much. But
So Nicole, were you suggesting that we should not vote on bylaws today, or officer positions, or facilitator positions?
I am suggesting that we not vote on the entire bylaw, like we get into the bylaws, and start. Okay. I think we have 2 points here. We have clarification of bylaws and officer roles, right? That was council staff. She did that. So now we're into this bylaw discussion focused on officer positions and how commission meetings will be run. Well, for instance, I was unable to be here last time, right? So there would be a third alternative up there if I would have been here already.
could we hear the third alternative again?
Yeah, it is basically that that the third alternative would be to establish the positions of facilitator. We can call it whatever we want. I know it as stack taker. We can call it something else, but it's basically the person who says who speaks next. And that is not the facilitator. The facilitator's job is to follow the agenda and to keep the meeting on track. That's all the facility in anti-oppression in anti-oppressive format. That's all they do. The stack taker says, you go next, you go next. They keep track of the names. So they watch whose hands go up. That's all they do. And then you have someone who's taking minutes.
So in that model, Nicole, is there time limits? Because
yes,
seems like it needs to be, but at the same time, we wouldn't want to be oppressive with it. So there has to be a little bit of leeway.
Right. Well, number one, usually whenever you're doing anything off a consensus is whoever is present.
That's right. Okay, good. That's what I was thinking too.
This is all decided and like at the very beginning, like it becomes apparent at the very beginning of the meeting, depending on if you have 4 people or 8 people, or who those 5 people are even. So because depending on who comes together, you're going to get different answers, right? So all I'm saying is the consensus is on whoever is present. and whoever is attending to, just like actually the quorum, right? If the explanation on the quorum, whoever is present, right? And that's what I'm coming back to. So I'm coming back to that. And actually that's in our code, or how our code is now being interpreted, is that about whoever is present. So with that presence, I believe that's once that we see who shows up. Now we can pre-pick a facilitator, obviously, because they need to be able to connect with city staff. You know what I mean, the week before. So we would pick these people for the following week. They would know their petition for the following week, and that was it. That's it. Like,
So-
and every week we would pick somebody for the following week.
So I'd like to make a motion to add that as to our agenda, as if that's allowed, Becky, on 8C. For
I mean, I
just
don't
for
know
our
how-
record.
Know how to
Do we
add
have to add it to the agenda? I
Yeah,
think we
I don't know. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be added to the agenda. I think those were
Okay.
just,
Okay, those were just talking points.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I
And I
wasn't.
still think
They'll-
we could
they'll be
agree
in
to
the
call, I think we can still agree to call those positions anything we want, just because they were written
Right.
that way on the agenda doesn't
Doesn't
mean
mean we have
it's that
to.
forever or anything. Yeah.
Right, we had talked about the word officer in the bylaws, and I certainly railed against that quite a bit and didn't like that term.
I don't care so much about the terms. The first alternative to is elect permanent positions.
Mhm.
The second alternative is to establish a schedule for rotating positions. So effectively, I would pick alternative 2 with the schedule being every meeting.
That's
And
fine.
chance to lead.
That's fine.
That would be in what I have experienced in anti-oppressive. It ensures everyone's voice is heard.
I
And
think
now
that's a good idea.
I'm saying, and it if we have, and then you have wonderful things like move up. So move up your speaking skills, move up your listening skills, right? So if you are a person who is a speaker, like I am constantly trying to shut myself up. And I don't do a great job of it, but I do try. So that's my job, is to move back, to move up my listening, moving up my speaking, or for people who don't like, that's something that we need to ask our folks to do who are more listeners. You know what I'm saying? And then there's be curious, right? That goes with assuming best intentions. So when somebody's speaking, you're always assuming best intentions. If you have a question on what they're saying, you ask, or if you are concerned about where they're coming from, you ask questions instead of making an assumption. Those are all anti-oppressive types of ways of formats for rules for those are like Robert's Rules of Orders anti-oppression.
Yeah, that's exactly what
They're called community agreements, is what they're called.
that's what AMERTA is all about too. So
Community, and those don't have to be ours. Those are examples of some that I have used in the past, and we get to come up with our own. So I'm not trying to take over or say we should do it any which way other than how all 5 of us think we should do it, or all 8 should think we should do it. But today, all 5.
So the whole discussion was supposed to be about these alternatives. And so does anybody else have any other thoughts on that? I like the rotating idea, and I like it way.
I think the rotating idea is a good idea.
Would that be for all 3 positions?
I'm fine with that.
Would
Unless,
all three positions be rotating? Is that how you guys are understanding that? Or just the chair?
I think we all decide that together. I think we decide that all together at the beginning of each meeting is my understanding to the idea of it being less oppressive.
Right. So like, for example, I don't remember, hold on, I'm looking at names. Commissioner Mann, sorry, has chosen to volunteer for the last 2 times to do our,
Okay.
thank you very much, by the way. But my point is that that probably isn't a bother to him, or it doesn't seem to be. Whereas I can totally take notes some days, but to have a position where I have to do it every week, I'm not going to be able to do that because I can't guarantee where I'm going to be on any given day and whether or not I'm going to be able to do that. So, and that's one of the reasons why the idea of rotating and coming together that day, because I might feel like I want to lead the meeting today. Most days I don't want to. You know what I'm saying? Like, or I might say I'll facilitate, and then we can make that decision at the beginning. And like, as long, I think our group is small enough that even if with everybody present, even if all of our seats are filled, like that, we're talking about a max of 11 people. So at that point, you're like once a month, right? Like once a year. So like to get a full round, like, so like, we're not talking about, and then if somebody feels like they want to take on stack taking or always be that person or always be the minutes person, like I'm kind of like whatever, that doesn't really do much. But I think that we should all experience each other's facilitation in particularly.
My one question I would have in that kind of a group then, so facilitating meetings is obviously, I think, something that can easily be rotated, but other duties that chairs normally have in commissions include other things that may not, that we may not be able to simply pass on month to month. For example, possibly driving bigger strategies, maybe doing outreach with other groups. Are you suggesting that we should
form?
I'm talking I missed the end of you and the beginning of you. So
I think the only reason why chairs do those types of things is because of the hierarchy.
I do too.
Right. So like all of those things can be done by any of us. Okay. And the facilitator who is making the agenda, right, would be picked at the end of the meeting, and they would have the full week. They would have the meeting, they would get their meeting minutes. They would have been at the meeting. They will get the full meeting week to sit down with city staff and work on that agenda. Like Becky said, Becky and Stephen are both there to help form that agenda and move us along also, which also helps lend to some of those larger strategies that you're talking about. But as far as like one person getting the lead anything, I'm against it. I'm against it. I'm going to.
Just a clarification, it sounded like a second ago you were suggesting we decide at the beginning of every meeting who's going to have those positions, and now it sounds like that we would be deciding at the end of every meeting who's going to do all 3 of those things for the next meeting. And will we still have 3 positions, or do you just see us choosing like a note taker and a facilitator every meeting and then that's it?
No, okay, so there could be as many positions as we think we need. Okay, so this is just what I have experienced in the past. And in the past, it takes 3 people. It takes one person to keep folks from talking over each other, which we do pretty well for the most part because we're small right now. But with 11, it'll get more difficult. And then there is a note taker, and then there is a facilitator. I believe that the facilitator should always I believe that the facilitator should always rotate. I believe that the facilitator would need to be chosen at the end of the previous meeting in order to be able to be prepared to facilitate. Because
That means they would have to be at both meetings, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So the only way I can think of that would work cohesively might be to email the group as a whole, except to know what those things are. And then when we know what that is for the coming meeting, let's say, Nicole, you've decided it's going to be you next month, then, and there's been some emails about that to make sure that everybody's clear, then you can branch off and work with Stephen and Becky on the agenda for the next meeting. And but then we don't know we already know who's taking the notes from that last meeting. So you would know who to get your minutes from.
Right. So the person, that's what I'm saying is like the minutes will be had, right?
But
Minutes
sometimes
already
you don't
had.
get the minute until the very last minute. So
Right, which is sometimes problematic, and that's why I didn't want to do it in the first place. One time I said I'd do it as
No, I'm just
Instead of
saying.
just choosing, sorry,
No, I'm just
sorry.
saying.
And so may I suggest, instead of like choosing voluntarily, like every month or at the end of every meeting, what about if we had a system? Because what I'm concerned about is also from my previous commission experience, I don't think we're going to have people loudly volunteer to take these jobs. And so my other thing for fairness would be, we would be required to do this. And I would suggest that maybe for planning purposes and to avoid, like Renee was saying, where people aren't going to be here and that's going to be why they'd never do it. For planning purposes, maybe we have this all planned out in advance in the year and we say this month here's going to do it. And we all either agree to be there, do it that, month. And if we can't, we let Becky know and maybe she can find someone else. Or what do you guys think about that?
I mean, if you want to pre-schedule it out, like that is fine. I have no qualms about
I mean,
that.
we can find some fair
I
way,
just wanna
to do it.
Yeah. Like that is that I don't think
I think
the
that
problem.
then we're talking about we can't be where we are in that moment if we do
Exactly.
scheduling out, and that would be problematic for, let's say, somebody with a brain injury. For example, I
Yeah.
have a hidden disability, so that would be someday I might not be available for that. Today was one of those days for me. It took me a few minutes. I pulled myself together to get it to be able to do it, but it was hard for me.
This is all I know is that nothing is going to work perfect. What we have in place doesn't work
Thank
perfect. Robert's rules doesn't work perfect. They get what, 2 minutes and then 5 minutes. The discussion is never over.
Yeah.
They just don't get to say anything else because those are the rules. It's nothing's going to be perfect. And I can understand your concern, Asia, definitely. And I understand your concern of the disjointed nature. And that is part of the anti-oppression. And it takes a little getting used to. It really does. When all of a sudden everyone is down on the same level and no one has control anymore, sometimes weird stuff happens.
that would be nice.
It's uncomfortable,
Down
doesn't
on a bad level with
People
people
get
having
uncomfortable.
control in
Yeah.
what
So
to
like,
do.
because we're so used to that power and control structure. But I'm telling you guys, if we're going to be respected in the community for what we want to suggest that this city do, we better look like we decolonizing ourselves.
Amen.
I just want to
So-
point out, we're at 2:00.
I hear you. And
Yeah,
we're
thanks, Nick.
also on our last agenda item, which is wonderful.
I just want to point out when you're talking about stuff being colonized in this group, is not the way that you think it is. So you don't even want to go there with me right now.
Well, we could get into deep, deep layers of that.
Oh, yeah.
I am talking about the way that the structure of the government is currently been built, and
I
that
know.
is
I'm talking about.
yeah.
things.
It's some
This is-
Yeah. It's
if we don't want to go
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Can I ask?
So we,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
all I was gonna say is we did get to the last number. So
I just wanted some clarification. I'm happy to try to write up something to put into the bylaws, into the draft bylaws for further discussion. I'm not familiar with a stack taker. I've never heard that. I don't know, Nicole, if you would prefer to just write up what, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
So-
Renee, would you mind meeting with me and getting something together in the next, and because you came with the aorta,
Yeah, I can do that.
I don't want to be the one to take this over because
Well-
that's a major player for me.
We'll
And
need
that
to
was
do it-
for-
we'll need to do it together. I don't want to do it alone. So yes, I can do that with you.
okay, great. Then yes, Becky, me and Commissioner, sorry.
Right. No, that was right.
I know, but me and Commissioner, I don't remember her last name.
Oh, Miller.
Miller,
I'm sorry.
And then
still
I had
have to
one other
this.
thing I wanted to just bring up from a practical perspective. Sometimes someone needs to sign something like the electronics meeting policy, or if a resolution is passed. And so,
We'll discuss that also and get back to you.
right, yeah, I just would like,
We'll need to discuss that and how we can handle that going
Okay.
forward.
okay.
this meeting has been.
Nicole, you're muted.
I know I have background noise happening right now, so I've been trying to keep it down for you guys.
But Kamala also had said something and I think we.
Yeah, I was asking Becky if there are any, does that have to be one person?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Well, you mean
That's-
to sign it? Yes, one
Yeah.
person. Yeah, one
Does-
person needs to sign things.
Right, but does it have to always be the same person?
It does not, as long as the group agrees
Okay.
that whoever is
Right.
signing it is the person in charge at the time. Not in charge, but who's authorized to.
To be the signer at that
I think
point.
you're getting the point there. I like the way you changed your vernacular,
Yeah.
Becky, with not in charge. That was
Not in
smooth.
charge,
That was
authorized.
smooth.
Thank you.
Yes, it's
That
been
is
quite.
exactly what we're trying to
it's been
get to.
Quite quite a
Get
white
that
meeting.
impressive.
We have to think about language. I'm telling you, I'll never be able
my.
to draft any kind of reformative stuff if we can think about our language within our own organization. So like we have to, I mean, like how do we tell the cops to reorganize themselves if we can't reorganize ourselves? So like, that's just kind of how I look at it.
So we're gonna meet to talk about that. We're gonna send Becky that. Would others also like to see that? I don't want to leave anybody out that wants
Yeah,
to be included because that's not a good feeling either.
I don't really want to be included, but I would like for you both to keep in mind that for it to be fair, I don't think it can just be done voluntarily. And if it is done voluntarily, I bet it's going to be the same for people over and over. So I think there needs to be some mechanism. I think for it to actually work, there needs to be a mechanism where it's actually required or something like that. I don't think
Okay.
it's voluntarily necessarily
Can I
going to.
ask you a question? There are 5 commissioners present today, correct? Out of the 5 commissioners present who have made the effort to be here, okay, 4 are speaking a lot and one's taking notes. And so I don't know that as of right now, as a commission, that we need that you could actually honestly say that, because I think we all a lot. I don't think anybody's quiet except for Alex. Oh, Commissioner Mann. I'm
Not
sorry.
quiet.
I'm so bad at this. I know you guys from Facebook and it's weird.
Among other things.
Yes, among other things. So I do apologize for the lack of respect in my addressing everybody correctly. But what I'm saying is that I hear what you're saying, and I feel, Najla, that you are having, in my opinion, an adverse reaction to the idea of there being no control. And
No, I'm not. Actually, I'm having an adverse reaction to your kind of talking over everyone while insisting on anti-oppressive measures for our group.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I have two other people that have been saying the same thing and have been asking me questions, and we've been having a conversation.
I've been trying to push this from the very first
Yeah.
meeting.
You've been
So
trying
I'm
to push
sorry.
a lot of
I know
stuff.
that.
I just think for me, it's going to be more anti-oppressive if this is fair, because what it sounds like to me is that if you just want to say, well, whoever wants to do it next month can do it next month. That's okay. But I don't see that as being fair, a fair systemic way. That's just like, if someone wants to do it, they'll do it. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm expressing myself well in this. I'm definitely not trying to say I want there to be oppression on this commission.
It's not about oppression. All control is not oppression. I mean, self-control. We self-control. We have to self-control ourselves every day, and that's a good thing. Like
Sometimes the lack of
that.
control can be more oppressive.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is, when I use the word control, I'm not using it as a synonym for oppression. Okay, so I don't want you to take it that way, first of all. What I am saying is there is a lot of control in the way the city in Robert's Rules of Order and in the hierarchical structure of a traditional.
I understand. I'm just saying, as a disabled person, I think that this way would be a lot more fair and anti-oppressive if it were like ordered and set up
Organized.
regularly in advance,
well,
where we could plan on it and where we know it's being fairly run and being fairly executed, and it's not just a few people who like to talk a lot who are volunteering for it.
Like you too, Leisure. Anyways, I would like to invite Jada B to come speak in September. And now that we have a date, I'll go ahead and reach out to her. She's going to come talk about anti-oppression.
Thank you for doing that.
Which
Jada.
organization is she
Jada.
representing?
She's representing Black Lives Matter Bloomington.
Is she with Black Lives Matter Bloomington? I thought that was an IU organization.
I'm sorry, you're mistaken. It's Black Lives Matter Bloomington, and she is on the core council because they have decolonized their council. They don't have a board. They have a core council, and they're all equal. And she's going to come and tell us how they do it. Okay, Najla?
So I would like to, I heard everybody. Does anybody else have anything else? I haven't heard a whole lot from a couple people before we adjourn.
Oh,
I heard a no. Well, I would like to suggest that people kind of look over, if you have time, to look over the aorta things again. I know I've mentioned it several times.
You sent it to us twice. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I've been trying. But here we are.
Google Drive.
So
I mean, lots of us are familiar with these anti-oppressive, less hierarchical approaches. It's just some small things I'm suggesting that you're really reacting to, I think, in a negative way. Sorry.
Oh,
And it doesn't matter how
I'm
much
not
you
reacting
approach it in
negatively. I
discussion
that
if you
we
still act
are-
in an oppressive manner.
okay, I missed it. I'm sorry. Could somebody repeat themselves?
You see-
Kamala?
Kamala, you speak.
I said it doesn't matter how many anti-oppressive approaches you talk about or methods that you learn about or discuss if you still act in that manner in real life.
Yeah, and I think I 100%, and there's gonna be discomfort and there's gonna be
So
things that
I'm
don't.
just saying that we can talk about all these methods and say that we're going to use them and whatever, but please don't preach about those right now. I'm just saying that, like, people who are like preaching about colonizing and anti-oppressive manners, and I feel like I have been treated in a really anti-oppressive way since I have joined this commission, and so I'm just like, you have no idea.
Yeah, that goes more than one way.
I'm sure it does.
And also another really good thing for a group to have is a grievance process.
Yes, 100% has to have a grievance process and the ability to discuss things, 100%.
Yep, I definitely agree.
So that being said, I would like to suggest that me and Renee get together.
I'm sure you would.
We will put some thing together about the order document, and I have a couple other things that come from Crime Think, sorry, and that I would like to bring to the table, and in that, and we will just write something up and send out an email, and we can talk about it. And we have a whole month before our next meeting. We haven't even scheduled a work meeting, really. I mean, we can if we want to come back and talk about these more, like specifically, and then maybe even organize all of these. Like, I mean, that's something that maybe, I don't know, Nejla, like you like hit on that like hardcore about how like he broke this down into groups, right? So like maybe, I know we'll have our notes, but
Did you
maybe
move to adjourn the meeting earlier, Nejla? Because you said it was time. I didn't know she had someplace else to be or not, because it's 13 minutes after.
Are we going to be able to take a vote on our bylaws next month so we can get to work?
I think that we're going to take,
I move that we have a work session on the second Thursday of next month, so we can have further discussion and come back together on what Nicole and I have discussed. And if anybody else wants to join in that discussion, I have a Zoom link and we can get together with that Zoom link. So
I could attend a work session. I'd very much like to vote on our bylaws at the next meeting.
So you could, yeah, I heard you. We'll see how it's going. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, we won't get anything done until we have that done. And as Becky says, we can change them as we go. We don't have to anticipate all this oppression. We can just start working and face oppression as it comes.
So maybe we could put the bylaws up on the screen. The next regular session and start making more changes. We've already started with that. And between now and then at our work session, maybe we'll have some more processing done so we know how we want to do that. Because I think that's, today we accomplished exactly what we were supposed to do, which was have discussion.
and it doesn't say vote on that agenda anywhere.
That's correct. So I think we're on track.
Sure.
Didn't hear you.
What?
I said I motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Anybody else second that?
Second.
All right. Anybody, let's take the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned. Bye. We're out of here.